Hey y'all, it's Brian Armstrong, co-founder and CEO at Coinbase. People ask me a lot, what is the crypto startup you would do today if you were starting over? And I thought I would just share 10 ideas of interesting crypto ideas that I'm really excited about. And, frankly, at Coinbase, we're building a lot of stuff. We don't have time to build everything. And I wanted to put these out in the ecosystem in the hopes that others would take these up and maybe run with it. Or maybe you have an even better idea, which I'll touch on at the end here. Coinbase is actually hosting an event in later this year in Malibu, where we're going to bring together a bunch of the top builders in the space. So if you're somebody who's thinking about building something in the crypto space, one of these ideas or something totally different, we'd love to chat with you. So we'll talk more about that at the end. All right, so let's get into the 10 ideas. The first one is a flat coin. So what is a flat coin? Well, it's interesting to compare it to what we have today. Bitcoin is really an amazing new form of money. It's kind of a return to the gold standard. One of the challenges with it, it's deflationary. People believe, as I do, that it has so much potential upside that they're a little bit reluctant to spend it today. And so what people have done in the absence of wanting to spend their Bitcoin is they've been spending stable coins. There's a lot of fiat-backed stable coins on the market. We've been doing that with our own USDC that we work with. But one of the challenges with stablecoins is that they're backed by fiat. So that means they have a lot of the same inflation risks. The dollar went through pretty high inflation over the last 18 months. They also have challenges with, seizure, blacklisting, the kinds of things, because they're ultimately centralized. They're ultimately going to be controlled by the U.S. government, who controls the U.S. banks and even foreign banks that are holding U.S. dollars. And so what would it look like to have a better form of money in the crypto space? Well, it'd be something that's decentralized and maybe tracks CPI. So CPI is the Consumer Pricing Index. It essentially has a basket of goods underlying it, things that people spend their money on, a place to live, transportation, commodities like, food and energy and wheat and, copper, things like that. And so that is a good property of money. We want our money to preserve its purchasing power, or, maybe purchasing power plus or minus 2% or something like that. It doesn't have to track it exactly. You could imagine variations of this. But we don't yet have a better form of money in crypto that actually tracks CPI and is totally decentralized and inflation resistant. And I think if we're able to create this, it would be a huge opportunity for the crypto economy to really leapfrog in many ways. Now that we've got a couple of honorable mentions down here, I'll add those on some of these slides. Ampleforth and Spot has been a really awesome attempt in this direction. Nuon, Trueflation is actually a decentralized service that tracks inflation. And so if you need an oracle that would feed into this kind of CPI calculation, something like Trueflation is a really awesome project. So this is an area that we're excited about. All right, number 2, OnChain Reputation. So we have ENS now, which is really awesome, but we don't always know when we're sending a payment to an ENS, is this the right person? Is it a squatter on that name? Maybe where they changed one letter in the name. We don't yet have like a reputation system associated with ENS. And so we still are lacking a little bit of this trust that is needed in any kind of economy. So you could imagine an on-chain algorithm that is a little bit similar to Google's PageRank. The internet is another graph structure, right? Where every website is a node, the links between it are the edges, and Larry Page famously came up with this algorithm, PageRank, kind of named after himself, which led to Google's searching algorithm, which was a huge breakthrough at the time, which kind of said, well, if we trust a domain like Coinbase.com and it has an outgoing link to another page, some of the trust of Coinbase.com should be attributed to that other page. And you can kind of recursively run this over the entire graph structure of the internet and get a reputation score for every page. Well, the blockchain is just another graph structure where the nodes are the addresses or the ENS. The edges are the transactions between them, and you could, or someone could, build an on-chain reputation score that is kind of like a crypto equivalent of PageRank. Now, this would be useful for a variety of things, as I mentioned. In the traditional financial world, we have a FICO score to determine, how much you can borrow, or we have like credit rating agencies. On merchant ratings on Yelp, you have to decide where you want to go shop. So it would provide sort of a repeat game to merchants who are selling things in the crypto economy. Sometimes you want to do it to make sure you're not sending it to the wrong address, prevent fraud. You could even use it as a kind of a gating mechanism around launching new products and services that you could make it available to the highest reputation users, or any segment of the market that you wanted. And so I think a totally decentralized on-chain reputation would be an amazing complement to ENS and the profiles that we're seeing develop out there. And of course, I do think it would have to be decentralized to prevent abuse and capture, because if any centralized entity was responsible for this, it could potentially be, you don't want to have like a censorship mechanism that's like these people are in and they're out. I think something decentralized would probably be best. Okay, on-chain ads, idea number 3. So in Web 2, the best business model was essentially ads. And we don't want to recreate all the sins of Web 2, but it seems plausible that in Web 3, there also is going to be some kind of a business model built on, how do we pay for distribution, ads, et cetera? How do we pay for attention? And there have been several attempts at this out there, but let's take a look at what happened in Web 2 and maybe what we can do even better in Web 3. So ads have kind of gone through this evolution from CPM, cost per 1,000 impressions, to CPC, cost per click, to CPA, cost per action, or cost per purchase, you could think. And Google, again, going back to Google, was really a pioneer here in moving from CPM to CPC. The big pitch of Google AdWords and their related products with DoubleClick and everything was, hey, you no longer have to pay just for impressions. You only pay if someone actually clicks your ad and lands on your site. That was a kind of moving down the value chain, and it allowed advertisers to better price out these things with auction mechanics and all the stuff that they innovated on. Well, why not go all the way to CPA, cost per action? You'd only pay if someone clicks it. You don't even pay unless someone actually buys on your site. And we might be able to do this given the unique properties of Web3, because all the transactions are on-chain. So imagine for a minute that you had a smart contract framework or standard, if you will, that allowed you to put some metadata into all the smart contracts out there optionally. And the smart contract could essentially expose some information to the world, which said, hey, if you send somebody to call this function in my smart contract, there's an optional parameter here for your referral address or your referrer address. And if you send people into this function, you'll get 1% or whatever amount you want to encode in the metadata. Now, people could then index this hypothetical company or startup here could index the smart contracts, publish this kind of standard, help it get adoption, and now you have an inventory of different ads out there. And then the ads are a two-sided market. So the folks on the other side, which would be people who have the attention and the users and the eyeballs, maybe this is wallets or various dApps or browsers or whatever, they can then choose in real time in an auction mechanic kind of where to route that user if they want to do a DEX trade or a loan or something else entirely and share in the upside. So this is just one variation that I've talked about here. There could be many other variations, better ones. And I think on-chain ads could be something big in this world. And again, some more honorable mentions down there at the bottom that we've been tracking over here. All right, idea number 4, on-chain capital formation. So, access to capital today is really unevenly distributed, and it's a major barrier to innovation and accelerating progress in the world. If you grow up, unless you grew up in, say, Silicon Valley or you live there, it's kind of hard to go walk Sand Hill Road and, pitch all these VCs and actually get a lot of money if you grew up in, Bangalore or in Rio de Janeiro or somewhere like that. And so there's a lot of really brilliant people and young people out there in the world, especially who want to start something. They don't have access to traditional sources of capital. And it's a barrier. It's preventing them from actually innovating and building cool things that we would all want to use. Now, we know that there is, by the way, just to give you a sense of how high friction it is in the traditional financial services world too, it's not just in venture. If you want to build an apartment complex or something like that, and you go to Goldman Sachs, you want to try to help raise money for it. I think that the fees they charge for that are something in the range of like 11%, right? So it's pretty crazy. The capital formation, I think, is a very inefficient process today. Now, we know that there's some amount of demand for this kind of thing because we saw a huge boom of this in 2017 around ICOs, right? Now, of course, not all of this was good. In fact, a lot of it was bad. We saw a lot of scams. Many of these things were really unregistered securities. And so you would need to do this in a trusted way. And you'd need to do it in a way that followed all the applicable laws. But you could imagine a product or a startup that was a little bit like Stripe Atlas or Plus AngelList for crypto. And it maybe helped with, the formation of the entity, which could be registering it as a DAO, maybe local in some market, like you'd need a Delaware C Corp in a certain country. It may even help you register it as a real securities offering in, the major markets that you'd want to actually raise money from. But it would also be sort of an angel list. So you'd be able to post, a pitch for your company. You'd be able to put up a fundraising video. Maybe there's some sort of tokenized accreditation that can happen on chain. So we know, hey, these people on chain are actually accredited investors with some sort of NFT that's been applied, where Coinbase or some other centralized entity could help apply that label to them. So anyway, if we're able to democratize capital formation, I think it would be a huge unlock in terms of people being able to build things around the world. And we could reduce the fees of that, make it more global, make it more fair, make it more efficient. It feels like there's a good opportunity in here. Okay, idea number 5. So many people in the crypto space, they have gotten into it because they wanted to invest in crypto. But there really aren't that many people in the world who have enough disposable income to invest in speculative assets. And so it's been really great to see the next waves of people coming into crypto for totally things unrelated to investing, like around NFTs or stablecoins or DeFi, et cetera. And one of the big areas that we could unlock, to get billions of people on chain is like everybody needs to earn a living, right? And not everyone can be an investor. Everyone needs to earn a living for the most part. And so how can we make the global job market more efficient? Just like in, lending markets and everything, today it's very fragmented. It tends to be very based on where you are geographically. The labor laws are different in every country of the world. Why not have a product or a service that's a little bit more like a global marketplace for labor? And you could imagine ideas being posted there where it could be like simple tasks that needed to be completed, or it could be actual, full-time jobs or contract jobs. All of them would ideally be paid in crypto, which, we shouldn't underestimate how big of a barrier that is in terms of being paid around the world. Things like Mechanical Turk that Amazon created were an innovative idea, but they didn't have a way to send small payments to many of the countries around the world directly to those individuals. It's hard to send $10 or $50 to somebody in the other side of the world, and it gets all eaten up by fees. And so they were doing these bizarre things like paying people with Amazon credits that they could use on Amazon, and like these little local economies of Amazon gift cards were developing in some of these regions. So it showed you that I think, making it easy to pay people directly to the individual anywhere in the world in a low cost way, which is what crypto is great at, could enable a new type of global marketplace for jobs and tasks. All right, let's talk about idea number 6, privacy for layer 2. So, the good news is that layer 2 has done an incredible job helping scale the various L1 chains out there. But the downside is that pretty much all these transactions, they are public, or at least they're pseudonymous, right? Exactly the amount, what addresses or it went to, the timestamp, et cetera. And you may not know just on the face of it on chain, like who is the owner of that address, but in practice, it's pseudonymous, right? Because people accidentally leak that information, or various exchanges, centralized entities can get subpoenaed, et cetera. And so it makes sense that we're going to eventually move to more and more private transactions on layer 2. A lot of the privacy chains that have existed to date, Monero, Zcash, which are really important innovations, I think. Unfortunately, if you're 100% privacy focused, the early adopters of it are going to be bad actors, and they're going to get negative attention and scrutiny for that. And so I think the way this will happen is we need to have a world where basically private transactions are optional. They're not the default. They probably would cost a little bit more in terms of gas fees or transaction fees. But it's actually very similar to how the internet moved from HTTP to HTTPS. HTTPS is a little bit slower, maybe the analogy there with transaction fees, and it's not required for everything on the internet. If the internet had started with everything HTTPS, maybe the government would have pushed back on it and said, hey, this is only being used for scary stuff. But HTTPS slowly took over. And I think the internet and the blockchains have a lot of analogies, or a lot of parallels, I should say. The internet moved from IP addresses to domain names, human readable names. We now have that with ENS and similar protocols. The internet moved from dial-up to broadband. We now have that with L2 scalability. And the internet moved from HTTP to HTTPS, the lock icon in the browser, everywhere. That seems like a logical place that crypto is going to have to go next. After all, most of your transactions in your financial life, you don't want those to be public. There might be some charities or things that want really high transparency where they want to have 100% of their transactions public, but that is not really a sensible default for most people and their needs. So I don't know exactly what the right way is to bring privacy to layer 2. It could be some sort of new protocol standard built on top of one of the existing L1s and L2s. And it could be a really amazing company in terms of how it's structured. All right, idea number 7, P2P exchange that's fully on-chain. So P2P exchanges have been actually a very important source of getting more people into the crypto ecosystem. They're not as well known as the centralized exchanges, but in the emerging markets of the world, the countries, honestly, where people sometimes need crypto the most, places like Venezuela, Zimbabwe, where it's frankly almost difficult or impossible to operate like a legitimate financial service business without probably local corruption and bribery and things like this. P2P exchanges are an amazing tool of freedom to help average people in these most difficult situations get their money into crypto, where they can participate in a stable economy or a stable currency and a global economy. So it's really important in developed markets. One of the drawbacks recently or so far has been that whenever these are centralized services, they tend to get pressured by government to shut down. And there is an opportunity, I think, here to build a P2P exchange that's fully decentralized, fully on-chain. And so you could imagine replicating the major functions of a P2P exchange in a smart contract. So it should handle things like escrow. It should handle reputation, maybe like that reputation protocol I was mentioning earlier, dispute resolution, mediation. So these are all important things which I think could be done 100% on-chain, and there may be a really good business here too in terms of building a purely front-end interface to it or something like that. All right, OnChain Games. So, I'm not an expert on gaming, but it does feel to me like there is a ton of potential here with Web3 and games. And one of the big areas around this is people could actually own the in-game items, right? And these games could exist in a persistent world where owning those items actually has real meaning. Not only can you take it out of the game and do other things with it, but it's an ongoing world with lots of different real human and AI players, the metaverse, so to speak, where the value of it is not just in your own personal experience playing it, but it's in a broader sort of world or economy that develops. There's been some early examples of this that are really cool. Dark Forest was an early ETH game, but and it was cool to see like Loot and Noun, like these different projects that came up with NFTs. Why haven't we seen more persistent worlds built around this idea of in-game items that are actually NFTs? And it doesn't have to be some tier 1 game with like hundreds of developers and a huge amount of money. I mean, imagine a relatively simple game like a Dark Room, if you've seen that, and a version of that actually used like Loot type NFTs, or it had a more persistent world to it. It could be very simple graphics, but I think there's a lot of potential in online games. Okay, number 9. So let's see, what tokenizing real world assets? Yeah, there's a lot of people talking about this. Today we have done this a little bit with fiat stablecoins. That's true. But tomorrow I think there are actually going to be more and more of these assets that get tokenized and put on chain. I think the main point here, people, it's sort of a question of what type of assets, right? You could take a piece of artwork or a piece of famous real estate and tokenize it, and people might own a little bit of it. But maybe the even more interesting idea here is if you look at other asset classes like debt that are very large and somewhat liquid, it would make sense to probably tokenize these and actually encode in the metadata certain properties of the debt, the terms, the conditions, kind of standardize them, tokenize them. This would allow probably more liquid, more global markets for some of these assets to develop instead of each one of them being kind of bespoke It could even incorporate ratings, like, kind of the equivalent of like a rating agency in TradFi, but doing it in a decentralized way. And I think it would probably make a lot of these asset classes much more efficient. Even various commodities in the world, different crude oil, like different things that people want to trade. If we can encode the metadata, make those markets more liquid and more global, it's probably a big efficiency unlock. Okay, and then the last idea I've got here are tools for network states. So this is a shout out to Balaji Srinivasan's book, The Network State. And, this is a new idea, I think, that's on the horizon. We've seen crypto is now creating new forms of money. It's creating new kinds of financial services. And there's people who are now creating these small communities or special economic zones or new types of, it could be everything from literally just people living in a group together like a community to its own network state or maybe even eventually its own country. And so I think more of these will be created over time, and there needs to be the picks and shovels of this gold rush, so to speak, is going to be somebody helping build the software to manage all of this. Many of these are going to be probably DAOs or things which have some sort of voting and governance. You're going to have fundraising or tax collection type metrics here. You're going to want to have a dashboard. Balaji helpfully created this graphic in his book that we have a screenshot of on the right. You could imagine a sort of a diaspora, a global network of these things forming with different populations, citizens, if you will. And you could have this archipelago of different territories, if you will, with, how do people even access these regions? Like they need some sort of border control, if you will, which might even just be like badging into a building and proving that you have some NFT or some a Bitcoin or something like that. But it's almost like this concept of citizenship. And I think there's an opportunity to build the software platform which helps, 1,000 network states be born. And that would be a really exciting project to work on. All kinds of service. You might need to provide electricity and fire and water and who knows what to these various places. So those are 10 ideas I'm really excited about in crypto that I think could be big. By the way, if you have an idea that you think is even more exciting than any of these for you, that's awesome too. I mean, I was just thinking earlier today with for instance, all of the Web3 profiles that are coming online, probably should be like some LinkedIn equivalent in Web3, right? With NFTs, why isn't there like a Spotify equivalent in Web3? You can kind of, reason by analogy and say what was big in Web 2 and what will the equivalent be in Web 3, or there might be things enabled in Web 3 that are totally novel and not like anything that came before in Web 2. And so if you have an idea that you like even more, please send us a note as well. And, the end of this is just a pitch that if you are a builder who's either you already have an idea that you're excited about, maybe it's one of these, maybe it's something else, or maybe even if you don't have an idea that you're excited about yet, but you're a talented builder in the space, you're crypto forward, I'd encourage you to apply and go here to cbvsummit.com. We're going to be inviting, 30, 40, we'll see how many people apply and keep it really, really selective. We're going to be inviting a handful of folks to come out, meet with us in Malibu on the dates that you see there. And the goal is meet other people who might be working on something similar. Maybe you'll refine your idea. Maybe you will find a co-founder. Maybe you will get an investment from Coinbase Ventures. And as I said at the beginning, Coinbase is working on lots of stuff, but we can't possibly be working on everything. And we need a lot of people, especially in crypto winter. These are the best times to build historically. We need more people coming in to build awesome stuff in this space. So if you're interested, send us a note at cbvsummit.com. And thanks for listening to my ideas.